Underwriting deals is such a major pain point for people. Most don't want to do it, and the people that are good at it are few and far between. That is why after 6 years of being in the industry and buying over 1,200 apartments, using my best-selling multifamily deal analyzer, I created Real Estate Lab, a full suite acquisition software for multifamily investors. We have built a product that helps investors automate their acquisitions and close more deals, all in a cloud-based platform. You can go to realestatelab.com and sign up today using the promo code TAG2 for 10% off your first 12 months. This is David Tupin. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to The Apartment Gurus, where twice a week, host Tate Siemer brings you deep dive interviews with the wisest gurus in the apartment investing industry. These experts are sure to create game-changing value and inspiration designed to catapult your business to the next level. Be sure to reach out to Tate at www.investwithgreenlight.com for access to his investor portal and Calendly link. And now, here is Tate Siemer and the Apartment Gurus.
Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of the Apartment Gurus. And we have a true guru on the show today. Mr. Jason Yarusi is with us. And, you know, if you've been to these national conferences and events, like you very well have run across Jason and his wife, Pili, and maybe even heard him speak. They are, you know, heavy hitters in the multifamily space. And, you know, it's always fun on the podcast to have people that are, you know, a few steps ahead of you and you know, can share with you how they've gotten there and what they do that is special and significant. And I've heard Jason and Pili on other podcasts, and this was one I said to my assistant, let's make sure we get, you know, Jason and ideally Pili on the show as well. So Jason stepped up, and we're going back to the old name. The Apartment Guys was the former name of the show. And, you know, we changed the name because Chelsea Garber, my partner and, you know, co-host, joined us, and she's not with us today. So it's just Jason and myself. So Jason, I'm super stoked to have you on the show. Thanks for doing it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Very kind words. We're always learning. So it's always fun to come on here, see others who are out there just rocking and rolling themselves. So excited to be here. Yeah, for sure. And looking forward to the conversation and adding some value to the listeners, and selfishly adding some value to me too. So, but I mentioned your wife, Pili. You guys are the founders of Yarusi Holdings, and I'm baffled as to how you came up with that name, Jason. But I think it's great. They've acquired over 180 million in real estate across 1,500 units since 2017. So nice, you know, trajectory there. Jason is an avid ultra runner and a workout enthusiast, and hosts the Multifamily Live Podcast, and also the Jason and Pili Yarusi YouTube channel. So check that out. Yarusi is spelled Yarusi, Yarusi. And so check that out on YouTube, and check out the Multifamily Live Podcast. Jason wakes up at 4:32 a.m. daily. I love that. I love that you're up that early. That time in the morning is so valuable, and I love that you do it at 4:32. That's super cool. And he's an aspiring ukulele player. But most importantly, he's a father to 3 amazing kids, and of course, husband to Pili. So again, really excited to do this with you. Jason, if you wouldn't mind, just for the listeners, just sharing a little bit of color about your background, kind of your progression in real estate, and kind of how you got to where you guys are today. Yeah, sure. And I appreciate that. We've actually had a couple closings recently. So we've just moved right over that 200 million mark, which has been pretty cool.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Pili, we met back in 2003, worked in some New York City bars, lo and behold, looking for construction work during a summer, just through a recommendation from a friend, have a construction background. And lo and behold, Pili was the bartender for a pretty big New York City bar. So ended up working there, and she had moved on, traveled a little bit. She was out in California, back to Hawaii, where she grew up, and came back to New York. And somehow I found my way to running this bar restaurant with almost 300 employees. It was a pretty big business, and we were able to take it and increase the revenue by 25 times. It grew. It was a very well-known bar there, and so it was a lot of fun. But it taught me a lot of lessons. The owner there was he just a lot of times said, okay, if I think it can be done, I'm going to figure out a way to get done. I'm going to throw as many people at it to figure out a way to get it done. The owner at the bar really just had a go at it attitude, right? He would figure out ways to get it done. And I saw how that helped him just grow a business, but also create so many other people that wanted to work with them, right? Because he always gave people opportunities. And that just taught us a lot about business, how to work with a lot of other people, how to have such a large business running proactively in such a weird manner. But we were there for a number of years. It was a lot of fun work in there. And then Hurricane Sandy happened in New Jersey. And my dad has a small construction business. And that business has always moved and lifted houses, right? Taken houses and moved them for a number of different reasons, but one for flood reasons, right? So Hurricane Sandy happens, decimates the East Coast, hundreds of thousands of families affected. And my dad's business goes from doing 12 or 13 projects a year to hundreds of calls overnight, right, per day. So my brother was working for me at the time. Of course, Pili and myself, we said, well, let's go out to New Jersey and help Dad, right? So we went out there back around 2011, 2012, started helping Dad with the family business. And same thing, that business doing the 12 or 13 projects a year, we started doing up to 250, 300 projects a year. Wow. It was great, but just the bar world and the construction world, what it really showed to us is that they're both, it was great helping people. There were so many different lessons learned, but it was the service business where we had to do to get, right? So if you take a day off or you stop the business, everything stops, right? It was a highly specialized business. It was hard to really sub out or do anything point. So we had to continue doing it. And I saw that path with my dad for years, and he was, a great dad, but just not around a lot. And Pili was pregnant with our first kid, and we just made the commitment that we wanted to get back our time. We wanted to understand a way to just figure out how to control our day. So it led us to real estate. And so we just started learning as much as possible. And here we are helping Dad with the construction business, but then we started flipping and wholesaling houses and doing some Airbnbs. And, it was great to get out of the gate, but here we are doing a lot of activity with the construction business. And then now we compile or pile on 10 times more activity with the flipping and the wholesaling. Yeah. So our goal, again, is to get back our time, control our day, and we're going further and further away from this, right? And so, we had our first little kiddo. Pili is actually pregnant with our second kiddo, and she meets someone at a local REIA who's investing out of state into single-family houses, right? Almost like turnkey properties. That sounded interesting, and we started running with that. But instead of finding turnkey properties, we started working with groups where we could find 2 duplexes, triplexes that needed to be renovated, right? And we put teams in place. Lo and behold, we started getting them renovated, getting a management company, getting them leased out, and then checks started to show up. And part of the puzzle there was that we couldn't be the linchpin that was getting involved, that was almost stopping the operation, right? We weren't the cog in the wheel was going. And it taught us that lesson where with the bar and all these restaurants, and I'd opened some more restaurants, some breweries, is that the more I can empower others, the more I could be able to do, because people would be able to do their big role, but I would also be able to handle more because I wouldn't be trying to do all the nitpicking of other activities. Yeah. So again, we're in New Jersey now. We're investing 1,000 miles away. Some of these were out in Indiana, and it was great. But looking at the big picture, to get to the level of controlling our day, it wasn't going to be scalable, right? It wasn't going to give us that scalability we were looking for. So we were looking for, well, what else is there? And, on a podcast just like this, hearing great people, I heard someone talking about, buying apartment buildings. And that was that light bulb that went off that I said, you know what, that right there is it, right? And it occurred to me, it was almost like buying a big business and turning around the business. Because I had 12-seat restaurants and like this one bar here to have even people out there that big. And it's the same operation. right? It just, the 12-seat restaurant had such limitations compared to this bigger building. Yeah. So when I saw this, I said, that's it. And I brought it back to Pili. And of course, like you hear a lot today, bigger seems scarier, right? Yeah. Bigger seems scarier because, well, man, there's so much more risk at it. But when you break down all the reasons why a larger apartment building made so much more sense, right? Being able to treat it like a business, the economies for scale, better leverage, being able to hire a team, right? Yeah. It made absolute sense. And we dove all in, selling off those little properties. And that was back in 2016, started learning as much as we can, surrounding ourselves with other people who were doing it successfully. And then that led us into 2017. We brought our first 94 unit that was in Louisville, Kentucky. And that was basically the start of our process to where we are today.
Yeah. So tons to unpack there and takeaways. Like one of the things that kind of came up for me in listening to you is you really embrace the who, not how concept. That, there's a great book called Who, Not How. And you originally started in business and then in real estate in the how, right? Like you guys were the primary operators, and that you're really in the world of how to get the business done, right? And then when you shifted and you were forced to shift into you went to an out-of-state market and shifted into a place where you had to have the people in place to do the work and execute your business plan. It became more of a focus on who, and that's when things become scalable. So another thing that came up for me is it's interesting. We, those of us that are in apartments, so many of us started in single family in one way or another. And we seem to all have a vivid memory of that moment that multifamily that you said the light bulb went off. And I remember sitting in this office that I'm in now with my partner and underwriting, analyzing, and breaking down a 12-unit deal that we were looking at. And we had only done single families up until then. And, I remember the light bulb moment where my partner looked at me and he's like, can you shoot a hole in this deal right now? And I'm like, no, dude, like it produces income. Like we've never underwritten income before. And you mentioned risk and how bigger feels riskier. And really, I think when you take an objective look and analysis of a multifamily project versus, doing a whole bunch of single families, to me, there's actually less risk in the multifamily space, specifically because of the income and the valuation process, where the value is based 100% on the income that it produces and the cap rate of the market. And that makes things a lot easier to underwrite and predict as far as what your exit price might be or what your refi price might be. And then you look at other aspects of it, right? Like your tax advantages, your leverage, the fact that you're putting teams in place to do the work. And if you do all those things really well and you get the who right, like it's pretty risk mitigated, really. I mean, you look at the volatility of multifamily and it's so low compared to single family and other asset classes. So it's something that kind of helps shift your mindset, if you will, a little bit, because big feels daunting and scary. And when you look at it for the first time, but if you consider the advantages of the commercial multifamily space, man, it's compelling, right?
It's such an interesting space on its own, is that it's very different in the commercial world compared to the residential world because it takes a lot of the emotion out of it. Yeah. Right. And so you think on that part here is that a residential house, someone might not buy it because of just the color it's painted inside when it could simply be fixed. Right. And so you take a lot of that emotional aspects out of it, and you see how it's been almost a darling through multiple downturns and uptrends. Right. And the reason for that is that, you get cash flow, you have appreciation, both market and forcing appreciation, depreciation, tax benefits, debt pay down, diversification. Right. It's a great part where they call a real estate inflation hedge. Well, multifamily is for that because it can sustain very well, right? It can sustain very well short-term leases. Also, we are such a deficit. We're going to be subject to about 4.3 million houses short again on this decade compared to what we need, right? We haven't met the housing supply per year since 2007 or 2008.
Right.
hit in about 2026, but we're still going to be at such a supreme shortage, right? And so when you think of that, okay, great, let's go build more buildings, right? But now it costs more to build. You can't find any labor. It's harder to get things in the grounds. And so on that part, it makes the buildings we have worth that much more, right? Because to put them back, now they cost more, right? So it's driving up the price of our current buildings. And with the downward pressure of where inflation is now driven and now interest rates where they're going, the homeowner who just, a short 6, 7, 8 months ago could afford a $350,000 house. Well, they were still coming in 20th trying to get a house, right? So of the one person who got it, 19 can't, right? So they're out there trying to look for homes, but now they can only qualify for maybe $270,000, $260,000 on that same payment. So you say that and you say, okay, great. Well, now they can't find a house at all. So they're going to stay within the renter pool for longer, and they're going to want to rent for longer, which is going to put more downward pressure on how driven it is based on a lack of supply, which is going to continue to increase on where our rent levels are going, right? So it's like that weird perfect storm that continues to make multifamily so attractive and continue to bring so many players into the market.
Yeah. So well said. And I mean, that list of advantages of multifamily, like listeners, you should take notes on that, because when you talk to investors and you're presenting the multifamily concept to somebody that's not really familiar with it, like that's a very compelling, impressive list of qualities: the leverage, the tax advantages, the equity you're producing, the debt pay down, like and on and on. Jason did a great job of really summarizing that. And that's key. Like, you need to understand that stuff, and your investors need to understand that stuff. The hedge against inflation thing that's massive. And we're in an inflationary environment. So guess what? Rents go up as inflation goes up. And when rents go up, the value of the property goes up. Now, cap rates may go up and decrease the value of the property a little bit, but again, that's risk mitigation, right? Like, and to Jason's point about performance and in downturns, like I believe the stats are the last downturn and the last crash in housing was 07, 08, and the default rate on single family was around 7-8%. And the default rate on multifamily was about 0.7%. So you're talking about a 10x, default rate in residential. And when you look at something like that, the risk mitigation, again, just to hammer on that point, it's huge. It's huge. And the reason why multifamily doesn't default anywhere close to single family is for a few reasons. Obviously, income, your rents are often still going up, but the diversification of, if you own 100 units and one of them moves out, you still have 99 producing units, right? You own a single family and they move out, guess what? You don't have anything in the way of income at that point. So it's a great point. And like, it's been a while on the show since we've really talked about the why multifamily question. And so this is a great conversation to be having. It's great. So 2016, you guys saw the light, so to speak. And it sounds like you kind of, you shifted and in your mindset and you're thinking about what you were going to be doing in the real estate space. And then in 2017, you bought the 94 unit in Louisville. How did the Louisville market for you? How did you decide on that?
I'll give you a number of different drivers, but I want to throw out, because we talked a lot of the pros for multifamily, but let's talk a couple cons just so you can see how those can be advantages too, right? So cons is that, lack of liquidity, right? So you put money into the point here. So or your investors, they're not getting money in and out, right? So it's not as easy as put money in and out of the stock market, but that can be an advantage too, right? Because you have a run a bank here, like, a stock, like everybody just starts selling it because of downward pressure and gets worried, right? So that can actually help sustain values. Other things is that typically it's just a bigger purchase, right? So it's going to cost more money, right? But it might be harder for you to get out of the gate. But once you understand the different levers you can pull, like using different things like partnerships and syndications, it opens you up in a lot of different reasons. And that was part of the gate, is that like learning that, like, well, how do you structure these things, right? Because most people think that this is just REITs or a big companies doing this, right? But anyone can do this if you start framing in mind what you want to go after, right? So because we all have something to offer. Someone said it very well. I'm forgetting who, that, we either have time, money, knowledge, or credit that we can offer to a deal, right? We probably don't have all of them, but we can offer some of them to that deal, right? And so what happened with Louisville, Kentucky is that we realized very quickly New Jersey wasn't going to work, right? High taxes, not pro for landlords, older structures, older infrastructure. So, the utility, heavier payments and the price per pound, right? It would cost more from a dollar perspective for the rents we could get in comparison, right? So, in Louisville, you get something for $50,000 a unit, you get $600 or $700 of rent. In New Jersey, you get something for $120,000 a unit, you maybe get $1,000 of rent, right? So, although over time, the market of New Jersey probably will trend better for appreciation on a pound for pound perspective. We were getting less, right, for that dollar amount. So we started looking at some markets, right, and we really were focused on a lot of things. We wanted a market that had at least 250,000 people in the MSA. So we wanted population growth, and so the good thing with Louisville is it has population growth. It's not something that to really, it's not going up 25% a year, but it is always 3%, just kicking along, like just improving, right? So we weren't feeling like we were going to have these big ups, big downs, and really flows of just inflows and outflows. Jobs has a very great job base, great job diversity. It has GE, FedEx, Humana, Aetna, Churchill Downs, Amazon facilities, the Yum Center. So it just has a University of Louisville, has 100 different players there. So we felt that no big driver was going to basically be able to take down the market like it was a steel town. Has a very good supply, healthy supply of really B and C class assets for what we're looking for. Had the markets we were looking in had a very low vacancy rate, right? So we were looking in the South and South Central, and it didn't have a lot of supply coming on board, right? So a lot of those metrics just really hit the gate for us to say, okay, this is a market we want to focus on. And one of the things that we did at the outset, more just on a learning phase, is that we didn't go shotgun approach to 10 or 15 different markets. We really just said, okay, we're just going to be in Louisville, right? So we're able to set up our team. We're able to, prep our investors here, so they knew what we were going to go after. So we felt comfortable we could go after. We were talking to lenders, and we got out of the gate, find this property, but we had done the legwork to be prepared, right? We had the avatar property, we had our avatar investors, we had the investors prime for what we were going to go after. So when we did get to this opportunity, and it took some time, right? So, we had an unrealistic seller who, the dad had passed away and the kids were like in their 50s and 60s. They wanted a crazy price, and it took that we made an offer, and it was substantially at a haircut to what they were asking, and they basically just gave us no counter. Well, lo and behold, 5 or 6 months went by, and that property was just kicking around and wasn't marketed anymore. It was still off market. We went back and offered about another $50,000 on top of our offer. And being back in 2016, we actually got the property. They wanted something like 3.2 million, and we purchased it for like 2.3 million or 2.3 and a half. So quite a discount. Tremendous property, good bones in the property, but they were just doing, everything wrong. They weren't taking advantage of a number of the income drivers. No proper application fees. They had a number of pets in the units, and they weren't charging for pet fees. They weren't having tenants pay proper utilities. Rents were completely substandard to literally the same carbon copy building just right across the street. They had no leasing activity. It was something we almost never had a market at that property because of how many people were coming to it. But they had units that were ready, that the lady in the office was not motivated. She was not basically partitioned correctly to lease the property. And the ownership sounded like they didn't trust her because she wasn't even able to collect rent payments. Tenants had to take rent payments basically across the city to drop them off, so they're having a collection problem, right? It was anarchy. Yeah. So we got in there. We did a water savings program. We reduced our water bill between the water savings and others about 35% because there was leaks and other things. We added in a cable contract in that building that gave additional revenue. We had 2 laundry rooms. Both were down. There was subjectively 300 units in that area for which there was no laundry room. So we put a laundry contract on and opened it up to those areas. So created a whole another income driver right there. Started just leasing, right? Just proper leasing practices, leased up units very quickly. That building did very well. We knocked out any of our lender requirement repairs in like 6 months. Ended up refinancing that building, giving pretty much majority of capital back to investors after 1 year. I think we had a 1-year lockout, so we did it in month 13. And then something like month 23 or 24, we sold that property. So I think it was like over a 2x multiple in 2 years on just that asset. So it was a great property for us, a great one to get out of the gate with. A lot of lessons. We had a couple things that happened that were unexpected. Like we had underground electrical wires that that burst because of a transformer pop. The electrical company tried to put it back on us. A couple things, but what we found is that all these surprises, because we had prepared to have proper teams in place, that they were handled very well, because the team knew how to operate when something came up, right? Because they were experienced enough to handle that. And that was continued to reinforce the power of having the team.
Yeah.
And that first one out of the gate, that was just Pili and I. And so the one thing we had to discover is that, okay, cool, that worked well. We had brought our investors in. We had all of our external team, property managers, the brokers, the insurance agents we worked with. But going forward, as we continue to do more and more of these, again, just like before, what happened? Well, we started to be the linchpin again, right? Because now there's only so much of us. If we're talking to investors, we're not working on debt. If we're not calling brokers, we're not making offers, we're not underwriting properties. You only do one. You can't do everything at the same time, right? Or you're not doing it well. So we've now continued to grow our team, and that's allowed us to continue to build to where we are today. Because again, we've tried to stop us being the linchpin of holding everything back.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, so many great points. I love what you said about picking one market and just focusing on that and going after it. Like that is so important. We picked two, and that's okay too, I think. But even that, like when you're in one market, those relationships are huge. The broker relationships, the property management relationships, the construction management relationships, like having attorneys that are market specific, all that stuff takes time and effort and energy to develop and nurture those relationships. And they're key. Like, you talked about bad management that was in place versus the good management you got in place. Like if you don't get that piece right, man, it's tough. Like it's really like impossible really to get your business plan implemented and executed without the good management that you need to make that happen. And it sounds like you did a great job on setting those relationships up. Again, like just the pain of the bad management thing. Like it sounds like they were terrible, but that's to you, that's like opportunity knocks, right? Because the value of the building's low because the income's low, and the opportunity's there because they could have been losing money or barely breaking even. And the seller probably needed to get out, is my guess. But and the patience that you guys had in submitting an LOI originally, and they didn't even counter. You didn't go back to them, and at that point, but you exercised patience, and the deal came back up for you. I think there's a good lesson there. And I'll just highlight, finally this power of the first deal, right? Like it's so key. It's the most important deal you'll ever do. It's the hardest deal you'll ever do, likely. And it's so key to do what you need to do to get it done, right? Like whether that's hiring a mentor or a coach to really hold your hand through it, or whatever that looks like. You guys really killed it sounds like, on this deal. And you mentioned all the lessons that you learned. Like that's the first deal, right? Like you're going to make mistakes.
100%.
Yeah. And Michael Blanc talks about the law of the first deal, and it's so true. So yeah. And it was 94 units, you said?
94 units.
You bought it for 2.3, you said? That's
2.3. Trust me. Yeah. And I think, we probably won't see those pricing models again today. But however, the one thing that I think may come around again is that it's been a minute that, just following up on deals that didn't trade really panned out. All right. And that actually, we just closed on a 64 unit for a little over 14 million here in Nashville. And it came up that we just kept following up. We actually got second place in the deal, and something happened. The buyer couldn't perform. right?
Okay.
And we hadn't seen that in a minute. And so they called us, well, hey, are you still in? We're like, we're in. Yeah, we wanted that deal. I love the deal, right? And so we were able to go back and get the deal, but it's been a minute. But paying attention to the deals that you make offers on, right, is going to still again start to come to fruition here, because if you keep up every couple of weeks and just see if that deal is gone and it's going to close where it is. It's been such an aggressive market for the last 2 years here. We haven't seen much of that, but I think if you can continue to just act and just stay with your pricing guidance, right? If you believe in that price and you're not trying to make it, just make a discount offer just for the heck of it here, stay with your price, because you're going to find yourself back into more and more opportunities now, which is going to be pretty interesting for this market.
Did you guys, how did you find this one? Was it on market? Was it a direct to seller situation?
The company, which is another point, right? The management company is an interesting part here, because typically if you're with good management companies, they've been around for a long time, so they know all the things that are happening in the area. So they actually brought it up, right? Because they weren't managing at the time, but typically they know a lot of the owners, the older people around town, they know a lot of the stories, right? So they actually said, hey, listen, this one's around. And we ask them all the time, because management companies kind of like the worst position to be in, right? If they do very well, you sell the property. If they do really bad, you get fired, right? So, or somewhere in the middle, right? Sometimes the private management company is doing well, but they're just not capitalized well. They're not positioned well by the ownership group, right? So if you do feel you have a good management group, I ask them like, hey, listen, are any of those sellers you have like looking to sell, right? Is anybody in your network looking to sell? And we've actually probably maybe 2 or 3 opportunities now through management companies, something like that, right? And so it's been brokers, off market, direct to seller, so management companies. We've actually had it through friends. Like, tell people what you do, because people aren't wizards; they can't guess, right? So, but you tell people what you do, and one, because you like, you guys we're excited about buying apartment buildings. Plus, it provides a lot of opportunities for people, right? And so for your investors, for everybody else, tell people what you do, because you will find, like, I've missed before because I haven't told people. Like, I had a friend who I've known forever. I was around him a couple of times, didn't tell him what I was doing. All of a sudden he's like, oh, my aunt just had she had like a 50-unit apartment building and she just sold it. She was like trying to figure out how to sell the thing. I was like, well, man, like, just because I didn't speak up. Yeah. Right. Because you don't know who else is doing this out here until you tell them what you're doing.
Yeah. So are you still using all of those strategies? You do direct to seller, et cetera?
Yeah, so direct to seller is funny. We have a good partner here locally that we've done the Nashville deals with, and he's just a wizard. Like, he sends some interesting things like Matchbox cars in the mail, like just very interesting things. And so we brought a $9 million asset here locally through the guy sending a letter in the mail, right? So that's not our driver, where he handles that part, right? We're more in a broker relationships the other which way. I have done some things, like I've brought buildings before and then walked next door and created relationships with the next door owner and brought buildings that way, right? But we don't do a lot of direct mail. It can be a very powerful way if you have a good system, noting that it's not going to be the same thing as a single family world, where like you're going to get people calling up screaming at you because their dad built the house and they feel it's more of a transactional conversation because it's another investor. However, it's going to be more limited, right? If you're going to go to these larger buildings, you're probably going to have a harder time cracking the nut because of just the layers of where it is, right? If it's a big institution you're sending it to, it's going to like the secretary, right? And so you just have to understand with patience with that. But there is still opportunities. We've brought two off letters, which is interesting on these sides of buildings.
Yep. In Greenlight, we tried direct to seller for about a year and didn't have much luck at all with it. And that could be as much about us internally and the person we hired to do that work. But, like you said, and to your point, the big units, the big unit counts, those big assets are typically owned by people that are really savvy and business people, investors that know that if they are going to sell, they're going to get top dollar listing with a broker and exposing it to the market.
Especially now, right? Especially now how hot it is, they would be smart. And, I found the people that have had success is that they've been spearheading a lot of the calls themselves because they're very important calls. Like sometimes when you do single family, you could have like a VA or someone else handling these calls because it's a less sophisticated seller, we'll say, right? And so you can get them to that next conversation, but this person might get on and ask questions that person might not be qualified for. So I've seen the success in some of our students and our mastermind and others is that through them calling directly, But it's a long play, right? So I figure like if you get 10 opportunities, maybe one direct to seller and the other 9 are going to be more of a traditional route.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. I was going to ask you, like, so these days in this market, are you guys mostly brokers? Is that where your deals are coming from?
Still same thing. We actually get some interesting things through the property manager. That's always an interesting play.
Not a lot of people think to ask. Yeah.
And then, but brokers, we did, we had the last couple have been pretty much brokers off market and on market. Right. Wow. And so a couple off market, couple on market right there, yes. Which, it's a competitive environment, but if you believe in the product and maybe have a different plan, it can work in your favor to go after marketed opportunities. But sometimes you're just not competing because, we again, it can't be emotional. Like sometimes a person's dollar is different than your dollar, right? If they just need to park 1031 money, or they have foreign capital, they just want to get out of their country. You can think of all the reasons why someone could just put money there and you're not having to meet certain return metrics that you are, right? And so, sometimes we're just like, can't do it. Just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And, we put all our eggs in the broker basket, right? Like, and one argument for doing that is you're not competing with brokers for their listings, like going after the seller directly, but like it's business and anything, all's fair in love and war, right? And but this property management strategy is so interesting, and we've dabbled in telling our property management that we're buyers and that to help us look for properties, but we've never done it in a systematic way and in a really strong, like intentional way, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And that's so cool that you guys have, you've capitalized on those relationships. And does the property management company get anything out of those situations? Obviously you might have them manage the new property, but is there any other kind of compensation or anything like that?
No, I mean, the business is one. Right. Yeah. So if you think about the business itself, that's compensation in terms of their own. Right. Totally. We had property managers that we've said, listen, like, if you believe in this asset, why don't you buy back in? Right. And so they brought in like a share or something like that. And that shows alignment. Right. I've seen that when we first out of the gate. But for bringing us deals, it's more that, we're also going to do the right thing, right? So we have a couple groups that know we're going to come out there, we're going to capitalize correctly. We're not going to put them in a spot to make them look bad because they can't go out there and do what they're known to do, right? So they've seen us perform and know we transact and know we're not going to bring a bad light to them in any way, right? And so that can be very helpful if you do it on that side. And then just ask the question, right? Because remember, they're busy too, right? So we ask, every couple of weeks, just ask them if there's anything in front of them, that maybe we should think about, contacting or taking a look at. And just not all the time, but once in a while you get something, right? But it's a 10-second ask to see if the opportunity is there.
And it's key because, often these property managers, it's not going to occur to them to connect the two of you.
Yeah.
But the big property managers that have, many properties in these markets, the chances of them running across something that needs to be sold it's very high, and
correct.
So that's tremendous. That's a big takeaway for me. Thank you for that. Yeah. So how often do you get to the Louisville market? I know you guys are kind of moving past that market, but when you had the 5 properties there, how often did you go out there?
I go up there once a month because they're always in different parts, right? So I had some stabilized, some repositioning. They always had been in some part. And like if they're in the repositioning stage, I want to be more proactive to get to the market. Right now, I'm going like every 2 months, right? Okay. We have weekly calls though. So I do have weekly property management calls with every property. So it's not a week that goes by that we're not constantly in the know on where we're going. We get our reports, we get everything in the know for the property. Mm-hmm. However, when we get there, visiting the property ourselves depends on the property, right? Depends where the property's at. So we just brought some properties on, in Decatur, some here in Nashville. So we're more proactive going to them because there's more of the heavy lifting process right now, right, between us and the partners. And then some of the more that are stabilized here, we're going to visit just to keep up with what's happening.
Yeah. Going once a month to a market that's a fair amount, actually. 12 times a year. That's a lot of contact, personal contact with your management, even your tenants, your attorneys that might be in the market. Like other sellers, and also like getting to know the market, right? So, when you have a listing come across that is in, X neighborhood, okay, that's a pretty good neighborhood. Like we should consider this strongly. And that's key. Like having market knowledge is key. And that, to me, that's another reason why just pick one market and focus on it. I'm starting a coaching program here. I'm going to have a handful of clients, and market selection is going to be a big thing. And it's, we started with 5 markets, and,
Got it. Yeah.
Three of them fell off pretty quickly just because you can't do 5 markets well. And some deals came out of Columbus and Oklahoma City, and those made a lot of sense for us. But so pick one market, guys, and really focus on that and go there a lot. Like nothing takes the place of face-to-face contact and you being boots on the ground in your market. You got to do that.
And when you have properties, the thing to do is that you make scheduled visits and then you just show up. Right. Yeah. And those are the 2. So you show up to get the read of what's happening, right? Because you want to make sure those align, that they're not putting on the dog and pony show for when you're there. Right.
Yeah,
and so
totally.
that's always important. But you're spot on with the market. Because the other side of that, people are going to say, well, there's more opportunity if I go to everywhere. Yes, but you won't know what the opportunity looks like, right? Because you won't be able to dial in. You won't know, if you're on the wrong side of the tracks, if you're in a bad school system. And by the time you figure it out, if you're in all these markets, someone else who's in only that one market has already got the opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. And also that property management piece, like developing, first of all, knowing who the good property management companies are takes time, effort, money, research, and forming that relationship and starting, setting up your expectations of what they're going to be doing takes a lot of effort. So, you can't do that in 5 markets. Like you got, and it's so important. I can't emphasize enough how important getting the PM piece is, getting it right is so key. Because if you don't get it right, you're all but, scheduled for failure of your business plan. And the property's not worth as much, and you can't sell it for as much. And you're not making any kind of cash flow or income because the property's not performing well. So, and just quickly on that note, when it sounds like you guys got great property managers in Louisville. How did you go about starting that relationship up? Did you ask other for referrals or anything like that?
Yes, it was recommendations and referrals, and we did switch one time in the process because a group starts good and they could be good through a couple properties. My dad always said in the construction world that plumbers, the first 3 jobs are good and they're not, right? And so sometimes that's his saying, but sometimes it trends to other ones, right? Some continue to be great. So we did make the transition. So there's a point that we did ask for a lot of referrals. We asked for a lot of feedback. We visited the properties they were managing to see how they looked, right? To make sure it was something that okay, great, that property looks the way we want our properties to look like, right? So, trust but verify on what was happening, and then make the change if you need to change, right? We don't want to hopscotch around town. We've had good relationships, a lot of markets we never change, but when you do need to change, there's no hard feelings. It's a business, right? If things aren't going well with the group, it's probably not going to get better. Right. Yeah. It's not going to come around and be better. So the lesson is, if you're not getting feedback, but we've been very on top of these properties with the weekly touches, making sure we get the reports so we never get stretched on where our opportunities are.
Yeah. Smart. We're starting to run a little bit up against time. I just have a couple other things I wanted to ask you about. What, you guys have grown very quickly. What does your team look like, your internal team?
Sure. And I'd say I have a couple friends. I've grown slowly compared to them, right? So it's all how we've looked at it. But right now, we have our marketing team. We have a director of acquisitions. We have an underwriter and asset management right now. So we're trying to hire, and then Pili and myself handle the other roles. Pili does a lot on investor relations, but that's our team right now. So we're actually looking to hire more, really for the fact that some of the positions we have now, we're starting to stretch them a little bit because they're crossovers, right? And then we don't want to put the burden on them where they're not able to go out there and act to their highest point because now we have them on too many different tasks, right?
Yeah.
And so now we're into that part where we're bringing on more, right? So we actually need almost, I'm going to call it an office manager, transaction coordinator, but someone really just to help us continue on the process with all the moving pieces that happen in our daily operations.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And that kind of leads to, I guess kind of my final question for you is, where are you guys headed? What's your future look like as far as your, goals and what you're creating?
Yeah. So I say that a good stage or phrase for us is we are always patiently aggressive, right? So we're constantly looking for opportunities, but we're not rushing into anything. So we've always focused on a deal a quarter. Right. And so sometimes it backs up. Right now, we literally have 3 that we just closed 2, and I have a development. We have about 10% of our businesses on development, and we have a development we're closing out in about 2.5, 3 weeks here, purchasing land that's entitled to build townhomes. But it's typically 1 a quarter, and we find that works out throughout the year. If we put that energy out there, sometimes it's 2 a quarter, and then nothing for 2 quarters, and then 2 a quarter, right? You never know how it works out. It's all about the actions to make sure that you're putting the action forth, because those actions pay dividends when you're out there doing the actions, if you can consistently do them forward. So we're going to continue to grow. I want to continue to grow the team. I think before it was Pili and I doing a lot, and we saw the limitations of that. And so right now, each time we close a property, I've been thinking to hire a new person, right? And it sounds crazy, but in that part, keep bringing more people onto the team, make sure they fit the culture of what we're putting together here, and they fit really how we want to operate. And I've been putting more emphasis on making sure they're local people, right? So continue to be local, have them come in here, and we're going to continue to span that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And, knowing yourself is so key. You mentioned your culture, like having a well-defined set of core values and a well-defined culture, and knowing who you are and what you're after and what you're about is fundamental, in my opinion, in any business, but especially here, and that will inform your hiring and recruiting nicely. Jason, is there anything in the way of a beginning and entry-level investor or somebody that's done a first deal and looking to scale up? Are there any questions I didn't ask that you think are important, or items that final words of wisdom that you'd like to share?
You ask great questions. So in terms of going out there, you're never going to time the market. Starting now is going to be better than starting tomorrow. We always think, you listen to the news, during COVID would have been the best time to buy, right? During that part, because we're put in position, but a lot of people were scared from that point. They wanted to wait for that next part, right? Which is that next part to buy, right? There's always that next time that you should start doing something based on the thought of what may happen in the market. We're never going to be able to adapt the market. Find strong markets, surround yourself with good people that you can ask questions to when something comes up that seems monumental, but as second you ask that question, you realize is very small on the big old board there, and just keep taking small steps daily, right? It's a long time to get in these properties, and that can be good because it's a long time if you come in the wrong way to probably get out of the property, right? So you want to make sure that you surround yourself with strong people, continue to take small actions, ask a lot of questions, right? You're not going to look dumb asking questions. There's a lot of questions. Continue to learn out there to get more educated in this space, because constantly we're going to be learning, right? The lending environment continues to adapt, right? We're seeing a lot of moving pieces with that today. So continue to get out there and educate, surround yourself with good people, listen to great podcasts like this here, and you'll get a lot of great information that will empower you. You have to take action.
Yeah. Yeah. And, to just kind of add to that, like, listening to podcasts and other forms of digital media is key. And it's one way of putting yourself in the right room. And I always encourage people to really put yourself literally in the right room. And, that's these conferences. That's how I know you and know of you. Look what's happened as a result of that. Like, just, a terrific episode and tons of takeaways. And, you added a ton of value to me and the listeners. And, that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't stepped up and spent the money on the airfare and the tuition and all that stuff to get in the conference. Right. So, listeners, like, all the things, right? Like, this needs to be a multi-pronged attack and approach, and you need to be covering all the important stuff and doing all the important things. So, Jason, this has been awesome, man. I'm so grateful to you and taking this time and sharing you kind of opened your playbook up for us, and very generous in your sharing. So really appreciate it, man.
Well, thank you for having me. Great questions. It was really great to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and really look forward to kind of watching you and seeing what you guys do from here. And if there's any way we can help, my team's here. So, listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of the Apartment Gurus podcast. And we're doing 2 a week now. Chelsea's on every other episode with me, and so we will see you guys on the next one. Take care, everybody.
This has been the Apartment Gurus with Tate Siemer. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. To contact Tate, go to www.investwithgreenlight.com for access to his investor portal and Calendly link. He loves to hear from you and thanks you for being a valued listener. Just a reminder that you are the guru. See you on the next episode of the Apartment Gurus.